Good morning. It is Monday, May 24th, 2021, and this is DC Signal to Noise. Okay, since we last checked in with Jim Wiesemeyer, Pro Farmer Policy Analyst here, the Cubs took 3 or 4 from the Nationals, the Cubs took 2 or 3 from the Cardinals, and Phil Mickelson became the oldest winner of a PGA major tournament ever. 50 years, 11 months, and 7 days. All of that is really impressive, Jim, but this is where I want to start. When you look at all those ball games from this weekend, when you look at the crowd at the PGA Championship, now it is in Florida. Okay, I'll give you that. But when you look at all of those the sporting events from the weekends, dude, what happened to the masks? They're gone.
Yeah, well, I went to the biggest mall around here, Tyson's Mall, over the weekend, actually both days over the weekend. And although the masks were being worn, it was back to normal. It was so good to see. I mean, there was a lot of people. You had a hard time parking, etc. So we're back here.
Yeah, it is interesting, and the reason that I want to bring this up is because it is going to tell us a lot about consumer confidence, and consumer confidence is going to tell us a lot about how this economy is going to perform over the next couple of months, which obviously is important for interest rates and the Fed policy going forward, Jim.
It is, absolutely. And, one of my high water marks to say we are really back to normal is Apple, because you still have to make a reservation to go in to buy something. And we all know Apple products are not cheap. So once they release that, and they're very conservative on the COVID stuff, then I think that's one of the marks I'm looking at to say, okay, we're getting back to whatever normal is going to be.
Okay, so okay, let's take a look back at last week, because there were several comments from Fed Governor Jay Powell. There were comments from Treasury Secretary Yellen, and it almost feels like, Jim, like President Biden is going to have to call a team meeting at some point and get everybody on the same page on the messaging.
Yes, but Powell shouldn't be on the message of Biden. They're a so-called independent agency, and that's what got some people, including me, worried. I just think he's too aligned, because perhaps his former relationship with, former Fed Chair Janet Yellen, who's now the U.S. Treasury Secretary. But yeah, you're getting split opinions because the market is giving different signals, Chip, depending what barometer you're reading.
Right. Okay, what else did you learn last week?
Well, I learned last week that they were talking on infrastructure, and then we saw late Friday, Biden and the Democrats counter offer from 2.25 trillion to 1.7 trillion. Then over the weekend, when you dissected that, the Republicans are still way apart on the gap is still very wide, where today you'd have to say the odds are low, really low now, Chip, for a bipartisan agreement. And that's all happened over the weekend. And again, late Friday, we had an announcement on the initial details from USDA on the at least $4 billion in payments to selected minority farmers. So we had a lot of things that broke, late Friday and over the weekend.
Okay, I want to get to some of those things. I want to go back just a little bit further too, because even though this beef industry meeting took place back on May 10th, we really didn't start to get a lot of the details until last week. Now, one of the most impressive things that I'm going to take away from that meeting that took place on May 10, Jim, was that people and groups got together in the same room and had a civil conversation that I didn't know if it was possible for these people to get together in the same room and have a civil conversation.
Yeah.
So that is at least encouraging, isn't it?
Well, that is, but we need to see a statement of principles that all parties agree to in order to get Congress to act. And this is what people are saying in Washington. If you're in agreement, we'll push for what you want. But they're behind the scenes. You saw JBS officially leave
Yeah.
the NCBA, although they're going to still be a monitor or something. I don't know what the exact phrase was. So you can see the tensions are still there, Chip, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no question about it. Now, how much do you think last week affected the momentum behind the effort to get some sort of a legislative fix or regulatory fix for what is happening in the beef industry?
On the surface, it may look like the odds are rising. I'm not going to say improving in that context, but again, what I'm hearing from congressional staff who work for the lawmakers who would be involved in any legislative initiative, Chip, they don't see a consensus yet in the people they're talking to. So they don't want to go for something and then be have darts thrown at them. So again, this issue has been with us for a long time. You well know, even when you were at, on the Pro Farmer editor side. So the contentious issues, there really no right or wrong on this. And as we talked on AgriTalk Friday, this is almost like the dog that caught the car. What are they trying to do? And will it work? What confidence do you have? Maybe they should try the old pilot project. Try a few things to see how it works, Chip, or doesn't work.
Yeah. So at this point, we're still going to call it mostly noise, right?
Echoes.
Okay.
Echoes. We still we hear it. It's like an unidentified flying object. Okay? we think we see it, but we just can't prove it. Yeah.
Okay.
But it is an issue. There's no doubt. It's an emotional issue. When you talk the spread between the packers, of the margins, and and to be fair to the packers, they're saying, look, they don't want to increase the bids because they can't find the workers to increase production. So there are some explanations of this, but that gap is pretty wide between the packers and the box beef price.
Well, and not only has it gotten wide, $790 some at the end of last week,
and it was up to 1,000 at one time, I believe.
Right. It's the length, it's the period of time that this spread between the packer margins and the feed yard margins. 50, I'd call them feed yard margins right now, $50 either side of break even, Jim. So it's just a simple fact that it has lasted so long that the frustrations obviously are through the roof.
Well, I don't know whether it's got some similarities what I'm seeing in the lumber industry, Chip, where the mills are saying, we're not going to increase capacity here. They're building up reserves. And so that, I don't know, maybe I can't talk for a packer, but they're getting signals. But in the case of the mills too, they can't find the workers. So even though lumber has gone up, 75% just this year, so, and yet at the same time, to get a policy statement, we have a Department of Commerce announcement, for over the weekend, Friday or Saturday, they're saying we're going to take Canada's lumber industry on for subsidizing lumber, and we need it.
Yep.
So a lot of odd things going on.
Yeah, and your similar or your comparison there is one that I was looking at a lot last week, because there are so many similarities between what is happening in the lumber business and what is happening in the cattle business. I mean, there's lots of logs out there, and the logs are cheap.
Yes,
the logs are cheap. The problem is the lumber, and so I mean, the cattle are cheap, the beef is expensive. The logs are cheap, the lumber is expensive. So it's another one of those backlog issues. And as long as we're talking about that, China made some noise over the weekend about putting some constraints on supply chain items.
Yeah, and we know China's a
Oh,
control freak. They're a controlled economy, and they're seeing some things. Maybe the Fed ought to watch China because China's trying to contain this, especially as it pertains to electric cars, Chip, magnesium, etc. So it's getting away from them. But China has massive control where they can get reaction far quicker than a independent governments can, or
right,
countries.
right. Okay. The one last thing that I wanted to touch on before we move completely away from last week is it feels like the Colonial Pipeline issue is getting behind us.
Yes, because I've saw there's no lines at gasoline stations out here
Okay,
where,
good.
every once in a while I would pull in during that time frame and they had signs on the gas pumps, either regular only or we're out of gas. I saw none of that this weekend. So again, I think that the industry has rectified the
Okay.
issue, but yet we have the governor of Michigan flashing signs that she wants to stop another pipeline. And again, we talked about that on AgriTalk a couple of weeks ago with another Canadian angle there. So you're just having, just conflicting policy issues, Chip, here.
No, yeah, conflicting policy issues is an understatement
You
in
know,
many.
I do want to talk to one another thing last week. I attended a DC gathering of Virginia leadership people in agriculture, younger people, primarily, which I always love those because they go around the table, where they're from the state, what do they do, what are the issues they're hearing, and to a person, Chip, it was broadband. Every one of
Oh,
them talked about that. Virginia was one of the 13 colonies, okay?
mhm.
What I heard from them, and they covered the state, it was horrible about what my state now, Virginia, has done relative to the inefficient high speed internet. It's just not there. So, I'm looking at, and you saw one of the packages that Biden did in the counteroffer was to lower the amount of money for broadband. Now, I'm not saying just throwing money at it because that's my problem here. They need to address what's really happening in rural America. It's just not money. It's the competing companies, who are good companies in this area. They don't want to go into the rural areas because of the cost involved.
Right.
We got to get more innovative policy to cross that hurdle. And so I'm going to focus on, Virginia now. I'm going to try to get an interview with the governor and things like that to say what in the H is going on in
Okay.
rural America, Virginia.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Interesting. Let's go back and get a little more detail. And as we start to look forward to the week ahead here, Jim, get some more detail on what is in that infrastructure package. Now, I mean, the highway bill, there was agreement on that, right?
There is an agreement on that. Now, that's the usual appropriations that you need for the Highway Trust Fund. And we're
Right.
going to have a markup this week. So Washington is not total, in lockdown here, Chip. So, but that's your core, some of your core infrastructure. And so that's a good sign.
Yeah.
And maybe that could build, but boy, the comments that you saw on the news shows over the weekend from administration people, what I think the far left, other people call them progressives in the Democratic Party, they're saying, look, you're already talking too long with the Republicans. We're not going to have a compromise because the minority leader, Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, made it known that you're not going to touch the 2017 tax cuts.
Right.
That's a red line. But I didn't see that being backed off in the counter proposal from the Biden administration on the weekend, on Friday. So, but that's not the only other issue. You have the topical issues that the Republicans want it to be more pure infrastructure, where the Democrats still want to bring in some of what they call social infrastructure into it. So the gaps are wide, and now we're saying that the White House is signaling they want a compromise reached by Memorial Day, and if they don't get it, then they'll go solo.
Okay, so is this looking? To me, it looks more like the old compromise bill with infrastructure than it does the Green New Deal type of a bill, right?
Well, when you read the 2-page, I've got a link on profarmer.com to the order that Biden put out Friday. And when you read it, it reeks of the Green New Deal.
Does it? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, see, that's why the gap, but yet the Democrats, if they go solo, that's even a big gambit, because if they have to get all their party on board. So where's going to be Manchin on this one? And the signal that this would give, Chip, to talk about the signal, if we don't, now we could be in the ebb and flow of controversial issues. So we're seeing a downside now. I have to be caveated that one. But if we can't get an agreement on infrastructure, you can kiss other topics goodbye. That's what it will tell me. That's why this is an important one to see whether or not we can rise, on the Phoenix front after the dust settles on some of these issues.
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll obviously have to pay close attention to how this one develops. Another one that you mentioned earlier that I want to get some more detail from you, if you've got it, is the USDA has come out with a plan now to implement, what is it, like $4 billion of payments to certain minority groups.
I call it selected minority groups, because that's what it is.
Right.
American Indians are Alaskan Natives, Asians, Blacks are African Americans, Native Hawaiians are other Pacific Islanders, and Hispanics are Latinos. That's what USDA said in their initial notice to be published later on, Chip. And what we say, at least $4 billion, because it's such sums as necessary.
Right.
Now, the new news that we found out over the weekend is USDA spokesman said about 16,000 minority farmers who borrowed money directly from USDA with direct loans appear to have qualified for the debt relief, while almost 2,900 are qualified for relief for bank loans that were guaranteed by USDA. So we're kind of getting some parameters on this. Now, you'll recall the New York Times broke last week that some bankers were upset because they're going to lose some money out of their prior loans to these people. But Vilsack came out and told the Washington Post that banks already have protection built in with prepayment penalties that range from 3 to 5%. And USDA took that under consideration in calculating what the payments. Now, not that they're going to go to the banks, okay?
Right. Okay.
Vilsack said we're going to pay those prepayment penalties within the USDA. So the banks are going to get a prepayment penalty payment. Banks will get that money back.
Okay.
Now, I don't know whether all banks have that 3 to 5% prepayment penalty, because I won't sign a loan with a prepayment penalty. If I want to pay it off sooner, why should I be penalized? Yes.
Right.
I'm not going to sign any loan for that. So I think that ought to be looked at too.
Are there any challenges to this program left?
There's 2 challenges in the courts, and that's gonna take a while, our good old court system. But that's going to be one to watch. I think this could eventually go to the Supreme Court eventually.
Okay.
What year? I have no idea.
Okay. Yeah. Again, another one to watch.
But here's another angle. USDA's effort on this. that was a pretty quick turnaround on this minority program, Chip, because that bill was just signed into law in March. Contrast that to the halt of payments under the CFAP, okay, that took place in January, with activity only resuming in late April, and some of the payments authorized under COVID aid in December 2020 have yet to be issued. So,
Right.
favorites here.
Yeah. Yeah. What is the status on those payments that
Don't
that should
know. Up in the air. They've been too busy on their priority issues. And that's true.
Okay.
And where are we at on WIP Plus? Well, I can gather that one again.
Yeah. Right.
We still don't know that. And we were told in late May that we should get some sort of announcement. Well, to me, this is late May.
Okay.
On the second 50% of 2019 WIP Plus payments, what percentage? And when the payments will be made. Maybe we'll get that this week. We'll see.
Okay. All right, Jim, last week on Friday on the free for all, I made the comment about this seems to be a more favorable EPA than what we dealt with under the Trump administration, at least from a farmer's perspective. When we talk about the RFS and the implementation of that program, there's some renewable volume obligation. RVOs are they haven't been released, but it looks like they're going to be basically steady, right?
Same as, yes.
Same as.
Which is
Okay.
at least a decision. Why they don't announce that officially is still remains to be seen, but at least they signaled that last week. So we're getting some more information from this EPA, and so far he's getting pretty good marks in farm country, Chip, and energy.
Well, don't you think maybe that is going to come into question with Biden's request to take a look at glyphosate registrations, and whether or not that I mean, it sounds like they want to take a look at whether or not Roundup should be available or not.
Yeah, no one said this government's consistent. Any government, okay? Yeah, and this is what has me bewildered over the last two administrations, from Trump to Biden. I mean, you just have to throw logic out the window. It's just what comes at them, and then you think you've got a breathing moment, and then something else comes up to say, wait a minute, that pulled the rug out from under the initial decision. So yeah, it could happen.
Okay, very good. Just a reminder to anybody that's out there that might be listening in, if you've got any questions or comments, use your comment tab over on the right side, and we'll be sure to get you in here. The other China issue, Jim, we talked about maybe tightening up some of the supply chain items out there, magnesium in particular. Another China issue that is coming up is we're back to Wuhan and that lab, and whether or not the coronavirus escaped the lab or was a naturally occurring virus.
And there's a meeting this week on this sensitive issue, and China's already commented to the U.S. to stop your what they call conspiratorial items on this issue. And this has intrigue in it too, because Dr. Fauci has had some sensitive comments on this, and some close affiliation in the Wuhan lab. I'll just say it that way. Okay.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get the full picture. I think both countries are going to water it down.
I talked about this with a couple of people over the weekend, and in both cases, it was, so what? Who cares where it came from? I'm like, no, I think it does matter. Doesn't it?
I would hope. It's the signals of what could happen in the future. Now, the news that broke over the weekend is 3 scientists in November last year got sick from Wuhan.
November of 2019, not last.
2019, yes, 2019. I'm sorry. Yes, these years go by. But it does signal that it's very important, Chip, because as we know, China cut off flights into their country, but allowed flights out of their country Just one word: explain.
Yeah.
Explain.
Very good. Very good. Again, it's another one that we're going to have to watch very closely as it develops.
Well, I think you're seeing a separating, not totally, U.S. and China relations. And to connect dots here, because I had to learn that in history, look at the closer relationship now the Chinese and Russia leaders are having now. That's a little disconcerting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Before we talk markets briefly to wrap things up, what's the latest on the rail? KC Southern, Canadian Pacific, Canadian National. Is Canadian National? I know that CP and KC Southern very polite, or no, it was CP very politely asked CN to, would you back away from this deal?
Well, I just got a note. It was too late for me to put it in my policy updates, but the board of directors of the Kansas City Southern Railway, Chip, voted to merge with the Canadian National Railway rather than the Canadian Pacific Railway to create a railway serving the three largest countries in North America. So that's late news here.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Again, before we talk markets, give me a good one. What's one that you're that nobody else is thinking about for the week ahead?
Well, I've got a personal infatuation with Bitcoin, and it just makes the corn and soybean market look like a dull market, Jeff.
Yeah.
Over the weekend, we had, oh my goodness, it was rip roaring. You have any involvement in this, and I only have minor, just to learn it.
Yeah.
It's like a roller coaster times 3, but you're seeing a lot of activity, which tells me regulation is coming and it should, to the crypto, currency. But other than that, I'm from my emails from farmers. There, I'll tell you the rice growers. Here's one. They were in last week, and they told NASS, they had meetings within USDA, and they told NASS, your planted acres for rice is too high. So I'm going to track that one too. Here's the instance. Mark the date down. In May, they're telling NASS, you're too high. That's going to see how long, number one, if that's true. And I always go with growers first on that because they're ground truth, as you well know.
Yeah.
But two, we're going to see if USDA lowers that rice, planting in the June acreage report. That's what I picked up late last week. So that'll be curious. But the other emails for farmers are saying it's dry, although they got some rains in the northern plains. But they're still frustrated at USDA for their China numbers last year, maybe an excuse because they sold corn when they probably shouldn't have. And so I'm hearing that all the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. They got some rain. They got very beneficial rains in some areas, Jim, and markets are reflecting it as we get started here on Monday morning. We've got this corn market is trading 15 to 17 cents lower. We got beans 9 to 14 cents lower with the new crop leading the way to the downside. So
it's the rains in the northern plains.
Yeah, I think that's got a lot to do with it. If we take it, the wheat market's under pressure, so that's HRW. That tour that we had last week from the Wheat Quality Council, that was one of the most direct signal that I've ever seen from a crop tour, including our own.
Yeah.
That, hey, there's a heck of a good crop out there, you guys. Pay attention to it.
And this year, the tour came later than usual, right?
Yeah. That's right. It did come a little bit later, but nonetheless, I mean, we cannot forget the fact that there is a good crop out there. Brought a little bit of relief to the safrinha corn growing areas down in Brazil. It all feels like the wave one of the 2021 weather market is probably behind us.
We need some other bullish news, and that might come for a while.
And that China buying that we had last week, beans were off 40 to 60 cents last week, and corn was 3 to 15 cents higher.
Yeah.
Now, it's the Chinese demand is what was the driving force and holding that corn market near steady when beans were under as much pressure as they were. But this week for the markets, I mean, nobody can expect another demand type of week like we had for corn in the week ahead. We can't expect that. I mean, that means we're going into a holiday weekend, Jim, with not a lot of bullish news in the marketplace.
No, and you'll see an improving crop progress situation today from USDA in the afternoon. Yeah, I agree. That's the consensus amongst the analysts that I either get emails from or talk with. We need additional bullish news for the upside, but that's several weeks away.
Yep. Jim, we've got a lot to watch in the week ahead, buddy. Thank you so much for giving us the update, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Anytime.
That's Jim Wiesemeyer, Pro Farmer Policy Analyst. I'm Chip Flory, host of AgriTalk. Join me at 10:06 and 2:06 every weekday for AgriTalk, and Jim will be back with us on Friday for the free-for-all. Have a great week, everybody.